Hello, I'm Michael Scott in the UK. Welcome to the last event in the series Cultural Encounters, Books That Have Made a Difference, where we are bringing together scholars and their audiences in order to explore themes of encounter in literary works and contemporary cultural debates. Today, I'm delighted to have my co-editor and great friend, Professor Michael J. Collins, here with me, who's going to talk to us. Mike Collins is teaching professor of English and Dean Emeritus at Georgetown University. He's the editor of Reading What's There, Essays on Shakespeare in Honour of Stephen Booth, Shakespeare, Sweet Thunder, Essays on the Early Comedies with Frank Ambrosio, and Text and Teaching, The Search for Human Excellence. And he's co-editor with me of Christian Shakespeare ? The Christian Literary Imagination, and the forthcoming book for this series, Cultural Encounters, Books That Have Made a Difference. All these are with Vernon Press. He's widely published in Shakespeare Quarterly, Shakespeare Yearbook, and Critical Survey, and regularly reviews Shakespeare in performance and has taught for the Folger Shakespeare Library. If any questions occur to you during this talk, please type them in using the Q&A button, not the chat one, on your computer. Towards the end, I will ask as many questions as possible for our guests to answer. Please don't leave your questions to the last minute, as we may run out of time. With that, over to you, Mike.
Thank you very much, Michael, for the very generous introduction. I'll just begin the talk then. The first Europeans to encounter America often thought of it as a pastoral world, an untrespassed wilderness where they might reclaim the Edenic paradise that had been lost. They knew the Bible, and Psalm 23, one of the oldest pastoral poems in the Western world, suggests some of what they may have imagined. It's a familiar psalm indeed. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me besides the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. The psalm imagines an unspoiled world of peace and plenty, a world that recalls the lost Garden of Eden and promises an escape from the iron truths that deface the world in which the psalmist lives. While we generally associate it with the poetry of Elizabethan England, the pastoral vision is an enduring element in the Western imagination. It has both a negative and a positive impulse. The negative impulse is its nostalgia for a time and place that are gone, for a better world that humankind has somehow lost or left behind, the Garden of Eden, the Golden Age. The positive impulse is its vision of an ideal world that might somehow yet be reached, where what has been lost will be found again. The pastoral vision is inherently critical. It implicitly contrasts what is with what might be, and finds that what is falls short. The American vision of the land is an expression of the pastoral impulse. The negative dimension is its denial of the past, its denial of history, its refusal to accept that what has been lost forever. The positive dimension is its dream of a Edenic future. The Europeans who first arrived in America called it the New World. and described it metaphorically again as the Garden of Eden or the Golden Age. Knowing the history of America, we are uneasy these days with their descriptions. But as readers of the classics and the Bible, it was a metaphor that came naturally to their minds. We might stop for a moment to think what that term, the New World, so familiar and perhaps now so uncomfortable to us, might have engendered in the imagination of the Europeans who quite unexpectedly had to entertain the possibility that they had gone back in time, that they might possibly escape the past and begin again. Captain Arthur Barlow, for example, a commander of one of Sir Walter Raleigh's expeditions, describes his encounter with the natives of Virginia. They are most gentle, loving, and faithful, void of all guile and treason, and such as live after the manner of the Golden Age. The Italian historian Pietro Martire characterizes the natives of Cuba in much the same way. They seem to live in the golden world, without toil, living in open gardens, not entrenched with dikes, divided with hedges, or defended with walls. They deal truly with one another, without laws, without books, and without judges. The people these Europeans encountered in Virginia and Cuba recall also the shepherds of the pastoral world. The historian R.W.B. Lewis describes the discourse in America at the beginning of the 19th century about a new world and its possibilities. The Democratic Review, a journal in 1939, declared, "Our national birth was the beginning of a new history, which separates us from the past and connects us with the future only." And as Lewis describes it, the new American, free of the past, with only the future before him, became, in a Bible-reading generation, identified with Adam before the fall. Now, I'm quoting Lewis here now. The new habits to be engendered on the new American scene were suggested by the image of a radically new personality, the hero of the new American adventure, an individual emancipated from history, happily bereft of ancestry, untouched and undefiled by the usual inheritances of family and race, self-reliant and self-propelling, ready to confront whatever awaited him with the aid of his own unique and inherent resources. If the American, imagined as a new Adam, could begin human history again, then the world he inhabited was a new Eden. For many Americans, the virgin land out beyond the settlement comes to be imagined, like Eden, as the place where God is present. William Cullen Bryant captures that dimension of the myth in his poem, A Forest Hymn. But thou art here, thou fillest the solitude. Thou art in the soft winds that run along the summit of these trees in music. Thou art in the cooler breath that from the inmost darkness of the place comes, scarcely felt. The barky trunks, the ground, the fresh moist ground are all instinct with thee. Here is continual worship. Nature here in the tranquility that thou dost love enjoys thy presence. Noiselessly, around from perch to perch the solitary bird passes, and yonder clear spring that, midst its herbs, wells softly forth and wandering steeps the roots of half the mighty forest, tells no tale of all the good it does. Thou hast not left thyself without a witness in these shades of thy perfections. Ralph Waldo Emerson, in his essay on nature, describes his experience of God in the woods. In the woods, writes Emerson, we return to reason and faith. There I feel that nothing can befall me in life, no disgrace, no calamity, which nature cannot repair. Standing on the bare ground, my head bathed by the blithe air and uplifted into infinite space, all mean egotism vanishes. I become a transparent eyeball. I am nothing. I see all. The currents of the universal being circulate through me. I am part or parcel of God. The belief that God dwells in the beauty of the unsettled land remains a constant in the American imagination. The wilderness in the 19th century is famously celebrated visually in the work of the Hudson River School, among other groups of painters. The painter Washington Allston, in a letter to H. Pickering about his friend Thomas Cole, describes the intimacy of nature and the God who created it. He, that is Thomas Cole, has chosen a profession in itself innocent, and if properly pursued, that is, for its own sake, in a high degree of elevating. Indeed, it seems as if no one could truly love nature without loving its divine author, who in all his works, even in the terrible, if rightly understood, no less than in the beautiful, speaks only in the language of love. Cole, of course, would go on to become the greatest artist of the Hudson River School. The putatively virgin land in the American imagination is a pastoral wilderness, a place of peace and plenty, tranquility and security. Huckleberry Finn describes what it's like to be away from the settlement, floating down the Mississippi River on a raft at a distance from the waste and and corruption of the shore. I'll cut a little bit. He describes the river at dawn, light coming up on the river. The river softened up way off, and it weren't black anymore, but gray. You could see little dark spots drifting along ever so far away, trading scows and such things, and long black streaks, rafts. Sometimes you could hear a sweep squeaking or jumbled up voices. It was so still. And sounds came so far. And by you could see a streak on the water, which you knew by the look of it was of that streak that there was a snag there in the swift current which breaks on it and makes that streak look that way. And you see the mists curl up off the water, and the east reddens up, and the river, and you make out a log cabin at the edge of the woods, away on the bank on the other side of the river, being a woodyard likely, and piled by them cheats so you can throw a dog through it anywhere. Then the nice breeze springs up, comes fanning you from over there, so cool and fresh and sweet to smell on account of the woods and the flowers. But sometimes not that way, because they've left dead fish lying around, gars and such, and they do get pretty rank. And next, you've got the full day, and everything smiling in the sun, and the songbirds just going it. The river is the Adamic sanctuary in the book. The towns along the river, heedless, wasteful, are nests of greed, corruption, deceit, and worst of all, slavery. On the river, a white boy and a black man can care for one another, and live in peace together. As Henry David Thoreau says, the mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation. He, like countless American, fictive and actual, gets out of town. I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately, to front only the essential facts of life, and see if I could learn what it had to teach, and not, when I came to die, discover I had not lived. I did not wish to live what was not life. Living is so dear. Nor did I wish to practice resignation, unless it was necessary. I wanted to live deep and suck out all the marrow of life, to live so sturdily and Spartan-like as to put to rout all that was not life, to cut a broad swath and shave close, to drive life into a corner and reduce it to its lowest terms, and, if it proved to be mean, well, then get the whole and genuine meanness of it and publish its meanness to the world. Or if it were sublime, to know it by experience and be able to give a true account of it in my next excursion. At the end of the novel, like Thoreau, Huckleberry Finn decides to get out of town, to light out for the territory ahead of the rest, because Aunt Sally is going to civilize him. And as the novel has shown, civilization is a sham, corrupted by greed, cruelty, and a system that enslaves an entire race of people. Lighting out for the territories to escape the past, to begin again before the settlers arrive. That is another American dream, but is a dream that never comes true. The myths of the Virgin Land, pardon me, the myth of the sorry, the myth of the Virgin Land is complicated and contradictory, as myths often are, if only because the land was never virgin. The indigenous people, imagined sometimes as inhabitants of the Golden Age, and at other times as brutal savages who had to be civilized or exterminated, were always on the land. The mythic vision of the unsettled wilderness has always been troubled by the demographics of history, but there are other complications and contradictions as well. As the first Americans soon discovered, the possession of Eden leads inexorably to its destruction. As soon as you settle down in Eden, Eden moves somewhere else. And in America, historically and mythically, the lost paradise, the Garden of Eden, moves west, just beyond the last settlement. But it is always too late. When the Americans get there, paradise is gone, and they find or create the same old world they left behind in the East. As a result, Americans either look back with regret and nostalgia at the loss of Eden, or head further west to seek it in the woods, the wilderness, the open land. One of the great American stories that encounters the paradox of the mythic land is Shane, a Western story, a book by Frank Schaeffer, and later a film with Alan Ladd. In the final moments of the film, Shane, the gunfighter who has committed himself to protecting a community of farmers, arrives at a saloon for the climactic gunfighter. This is a highly conventional form of film, as you probably know. He tells the cattleman, who has tried to keep the newly arrived settlers from building farms and fences and cultivating the open range where his cattle graze, your days are over. Settlement is bringing an end to the open range. The cattleman replies, so are yours, gunfighter. Shane answers, yes, but I know it. As the farmers come west to build new lives in the open land, to begin again, to create their own version of Eden, they paradoxically destroy the virgin land by cultivating it and creating communities that will, environmentally and morally, simply replicate those they left behind in the East. Progress, if you want to call it that, settlement, exploitation of resources, destroys the land that held out Edenic possibilities. At the end of the film, Shane tells Joey, the son of the farmer he has been working for, that he's got to be going on. And in the final scene, Shane rides alone into the mountains, into the virgin land. He's got to be going on, not only because he and Joey's mother have fallen in love, but because he knows time is running out. He rides west in search of the lost Eden, the longed-for brave new world, which he, by protecting the farmers, has helped to destroy. As the film suggests, America's vision of the land, of the wilderness, is schizophrenic. The woods, the wilderness, the open lands suggest Edenic possibilities, and yet it must be settled, civilized, mined, stripped of its mythic resonance. Once again, Eden slips behind, lost forever, or moves somewhere farther out west. In Willa Cather's novel, A Lost Lady, a young man regrets the passing of what he proposes was a more heroic moment in America's history, the passing of a world and a way of life that is, like Shane's, slowly being replaced in the book by land speculation and the narrow getting and spending of small town life. Quoting now Cather, the people, the very country itself was changing so fast that there would be nothing to come back to. He had seen the end. This is the boy who is the center of the main character of the story is the he. He had seen the end of an era, the sunset of the pioneer. He had come upon it when already its glory was nearly spent. So in the Buffalo times, a traveler used to come upon the embers of a hunter's fire on the prairie. After the hunter was up and gone, the coals would be trampled out, but the ground was warm, and the flattened grass where he had slept and where his pony had grazed told the story. This was the very end of the road-making West. The men who had put plains and mountains under iron harness were old. Some were poor, and even the successful ones were hunting for rest and a brief reprieve from death. It was already gone, that age. Nothing could bring it back. The taste and smell and song of it, the visions those men had seen in the air and followed, these he had caught in a kind of afterglow in their own faces, and this would always be his. Here Willa Cather sets out another version of the American myth, another American story, one that does not seem entirely comfortable with the Edenic myth. It is at play as well in a somewhat different form in Shane. America celebrates the heroic pioneers who went west ahead of the settlers to tame the land, to bring civilization to an uncharted expanse of the country, to fulfill America's manifest destiny to expand from coast to coast, from Maine to California. In this American myth, the passing of this moment, the heroic men and the pristine wilderness they encountered, is regretfully the price America must pay to fulfill its destiny. The myth is complicated, complex, and contradictory. Excuse me. As you move out into the Edenic wilderness, to paraphrase Clint Eastwood in the film Unforgiven, you better arm yourself. You better arm yourself. If you leave the security of the settlement, you're on your own. A version of the self-reliant American individual Emerson celebrated. And thus the gun becomes part of the mythology. On the one hand, Americans had to arm themselves in order to take from those who lived on it the land they wanted for themselves. On the other hand, they had to protect themselves, absent the rule of law. In the hands of Shane, as we have seen, the gun is a force for good. In the hands of Little Bill, the corrupt sheriff in Unforgiven, another great Western movie, it is a force for cruelty and oppression. Just as we hear in a different form today, those self-reliant American settlers had to arm themselves to protect family and property out in the wilderness when the possessors of the land resisted or the law was lax, corrupt, or non-existent. Quote, every late 19th century legal scholar that we have read interpreted the Second Amendment to secure an individual right unconnected with malicious service. The right to bear arms is prefaced by the need for the language that says the need for a militia. Therefore, we have the right to bear arms. But the Supreme Court finds that those two issues, militia and the right to bear arms, are unconnected. The Americans have the right to bear arms. Guns in the hands of self-reliant Americans have been part of the American tradition, part of the mythology of the land and the rugged individuals who settled and tamed it. But despite its contradictions, despite its obvious falsity, the myth of the Edenic land is deeply rooted in the American imagination, and not simply the people, its writers and artists, but American citizens, I would argue, in general. Ernest Hemingway's great novel of the First World War, A Farewell to Arms, is set in Italy, but it is shaped by the American author's Edenic vision of the land. When Frederick Henry goes on leave, the central character in the story goes on leave early in the novel, he goes to the bars and brothels of the city, although he knows the Edenic place is Capricotta, the countryside where the priest of the novel lives. At Capricotta, the priest farmer's father hunted every day. Aquila was a fine town. It was cool in the summer at night, and it was cool at the summer at night, and the spring in the Abruzzi was the most beautiful in Italy. But what was lovely was the fall, to go hunting through the chestnut woods. The birds were all good because they fed on grapes, and you never took a lunch because the peasants were always honored if you would eat with them at their homes. Frederick Henry, recovering from his wound, falls asleep dreaming of an idyllic land, far from the cities and from the war, a land that reflects the traditional characteristics of the pastoral world, peace, plenitude, and harmony among those who live there. Later in that novel, as the Italian army disintegrates after its defeat at Caporetto, Frederick Henry leaps into the Tagliamento River and escapes the Carabinieri, who are absurdly shooting Italian soldiers. He emerges from the river, as he puts it, washed, free of obligation, free of the past, an American Adam reborn in Italy. And he takes his pregnant girlfriend, Catherine, to the mountains of Switzerland. And in the mountains, they find peace and happiness, Adam and Eve in the garden. When they have to return to the city where Catherine will give birth, the Edenic moment ends and Catherine dies in childbirth. While set in Italy, A Farewell to Arms is shaped by an American imagination. As T.S. Eliot wrote in The Wasteland, in the mountains, there you feel free. In Annie Proulx's novel Brokeback Mountain, Ennis Del Mar and Jack Swift Twist fall in love during a summer in a mountain pasture, herding, significantly, sheep. In Proulx's version of the pastoral story, they share an idyllic summer together, but then, when they must bring the sheep back down from the mountain in the fall, they leave Eden behind and are never again able to repeat the past, to recapture their Edenic moment on Brokeback Mountain. F. Scott Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby, although it is set in New York, dramatizes through a love story America's search for the lost Eden. Although she seems scarcely able to live up to Gatsby's dreams of her, as the story begins, Daisy Buchanan has become for Gatsby the embodiment of a golden world, the lost Eden. Although his friend Nick Carraway tells him he can't, Gatsby intends to repeat the past, to bring back the idyllic time that he and Daisy, Adam and Eve, spent in Louisville years ago. In fact, he makes a trip back to Louisville after the war, a metaphysical journey, a metaphorical journey in search of the Edenic moment that has now been lost. Can't repeat the past? Why, of course you can, says Gatsby, echoing the dreams of countless Americans who believed they could reclaim through the land the paradise that had been lost. At the end of the novel, on the night before he returns to the Midwest, Nick makes clear that Gatsby has not lived his life simply to recapture a lost love or to achieve wealth and status, another American dream, but rather to make real the dream of Eden embodied in the land. Now, Gatsby. Most of the big shore places were closed now, and there were hardly any lights except the shadowy, moving glow of a ferry boat across the Sound. And as the moon rose higher, the inessential houses began to melt away, until gradually I became aware of the old island here, that flowered once for Dutch sailors' eyes, a fresh green breast of the New World. Its vanished trees, the trees that had made way for Gatsby's house, had once pandered and whispered to the last and greatest of all human desires. For a transitory, enchanted moment, man must have held his breath in the presence of this continent, compelled into an aesthetic contemplation he neither understood nor desired, face to face, for the last time in history, with something commensurate to his capacity for wonder. And as I sat there brooding on the old unknown world, I thought of Gatsby's wonder when he first picked out the green light at the end of Daisy's dock. He had come a long way to this blue lawn, and his dream must have seemed so close that he could hardly fail to grasp it. He did not know that was already behind him, somewhere back in that dark obscurity beyond the city, where the dark fields of the Republic rolled on under the night. Gatsby believed in the green light, the orgiastic future that year by year recedes before us. Like Gatsby's encounter with Daisy, the American encounter with the New World, the search for the new Eden has failed, and it must in a world of time, as it must in a world of time and change. The myth is complex and contradictory. The plenitude that the first visitor in America celebrated in their reports back to Europe, the fertile beauty of the land they encountered, has made America in many ways a wasteful country. James Fenimore Cooper's story of the slaughter of the pigeons in his novel The Pioneers confronts that wastefulness. In The Pioneers, the whole town turns out to massacre the flocks of pigeons that fly overhead. One man even uses a cannon to destroy more birds than his neighbors can. When they are done, thousands of dead and wounded birds lie on the ground. Natty Bumppo, Cooper's hero, America's first Western hero, is outraged at the useless destruction of the birds. Quote, Cooper, Natty Bumppo speaks, "This comes of settling a country," he said. "Here have I known the pigeon to fly for 40 long years, till you made your clearings, there was nobody to skeet or to hurt them. I loved to see them come into the woods, for they were company to a body, hurting nothing, being, as it was, as harmless as a garter snake. Well, the Lord won't see the waste of his creatures for nothing, and right will be done to the pigeons, as well as to others by and by. It's a wicked thing to be shooting into flocks in this wasty manner, and none to do it who knows how to knock off a single bird. If a body has a craving for pigeon's flesh, why, it's made the same as all other creatures for man's eating, but not to kill 20 and to eat one. Cooper's description of the slaughter of the pigeons anticipates the slaughter of the buffalo on the Great Plains later in the 19th century. Their mythic vision of the land has not prevented Americans from exploiting and destroying the wilderness, its trees and forests, its rivers and streams, its wildlife, and continuing to do so today. Is one of the many tragic ironies that disfigure the history of America. Its mythic Edenic wilderness has been ravaged and exploited for economic gain, and the process continues today. As the New York Times reported, the Trump administration has opened the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge to drilling for gas and oil, while environmentalist groups resist further destruction of what the article calls one of the greatest remaining tracts of pristine wilderness in the United States. The myth is complex and contradictory. As I wrote this paper, it was during the presidential election in 2024, the news reports spoke constantly of what they called the crisis at the border. At the same time, Donald Trump, candidate for president, repeatedly promised voters that if he were elected, they could repeat the past, recover a golden age, and make America great again. While I do not propose it is a vision of free and open land or of a lost Garden of Eden that today draws immigrants to American southern borders and voters to Donald Trump, ironically, I would like to ask them both, what do you imagine as you make your journeys to America, as, putting aside the bigotry implicit in his promise, as you cast your vote for Donald Trump? What do you imagine? Make America great again. Get to America. Get across the border. What do you imagine? The American myth, at its heart, is contradictory. The vision of the migrants and that of Trump seem mutually exclusive. And yet, despite all that it has squandered, America remains, in the imagination of many, a place where what is hoped for and what has been lost might both yet be found. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike, very much for that. Wonderful, wonderful talk.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Really interesting. People, if you want to send in questions, please do so that we can include them in the conversation that we're going to have now. I wondered about this, Mike, and the Promised Land and the whole nature of the Promised Land. Was there a Moses? What's the relationship between this Promised Land and the Promised Land that Moses saw?
I lost you, Michael. Hang on a minute. I want to get you back here. Sorry. Come on. I can't find the... Here it
I'm
is.
not
Okay.
Promised Land.
Joined with computer audio. Okay.
Recording in progress.
I'm having... I can't get... Oh, okay. Yeah.
I think you've put yourself on a second time
Yeah,
there,
I
Mike.
did. Okay, it should be okay now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, who is the Moses to lead us to the promised land? There were plenty of people like that. And that book by Will Cather actually imagines one of those pioneers of sort of the first generation who lead people into settlement into the West. There's a remarkable painting, and I think I can remember the painter, but I won't because I'm not entirely sure. Which shows a vision. It shows a vision of a man named Daniel Boone. He's out in the front of the picture, and behind him are men, women, and children, covered wagons heading west. He's the Moses is who bringing them to the promised land. People like Daniel Boone is the most, perhaps the embodies that myth most that embodies more than any the Moses-like figure in America. That the leading people westward. Daniel Boone famously says, "There's no elbow room here in the East. You got to go west where you can, in the West there you can feel free." And he's leading these pioneers. The fictive character in Willa Cather's novel is also one who sort of opens up the territory for those settlers who come after him. So that, Kit Carson, Buffalo Bill, they all have that. Even though historically that's not always entirely accurate, they're the people who lead the way and ultimately, Shane, lead the way and ultimately make it possible for settlers to come. There's
In
an
Will Carter's the other novel, which we discussed a bit earlier on in the year, Death Comes to the Archbishop. Um, in that one, it's the person is the Archbishop
yeah,
who's going forward. There is a link between the religion and the concept of the promised land,
yeah,
and in a sense, even to the present day, certainly in my lifetime, I've seen in America evangelical preachers really revitalizing that kind of concept.
yeah.
Do you think there's some kind of parallel there?
Well, in the myth, in the Western story, a story like Shane, for example, once the schoolmarm and the minister come to town, it's over. That means civilization is coming to town. The place is getting civilized. All the old corruptions of the East are there, and it's time for the heroic individual, Huckleberry Finn, Shane, whoever it happens to be, Clint Eastwood character, to get out of town. Um, there's that famous short story by Stephen Crane called "The Bride Comes to Yellow Sky." And it's about the marshal brings his wife, goes east, marries, brings his wife to the west. They're about to have the great gunfight, and the marshal's adversary says, "Oh, you're married. Well, I guess that's all over now. A way of life has passed away. Civilization has come to the west, and so." Uh, Again, historically things may be different, but when school marms and preachers come to your town, it's time to get out of town because it's now become just the same old place. And that means the end of a kind of heroic way of life, which is embodied in people like Daniel Boone and the man in whose name I can't remember, in Willa Cather's novel.
Fine, thanks very much. I think also Robert Harris's novel, the name of which is
Yeah,
when they follow they follow the man or the two men who have executed Charles I, when they come
yeah,
across, and it's a preacher there that takes them in at one point. It's interesting. John Ford Rescher says violence is always in the myth. Shane wishes to leave his role of gunfighter, but in the end must kill and then leave.
yep.
Even poor Gatsby gets shot. Yeah,
Mhm.
I always think it's a shame that Gatsby gets shot, John. So yeah, what do you think, Mike?
Uh,
To
What,
that comment.
give me the question. Oh, here, let me look at the question here. Let me see what John's question is. John, violence, yes. Shane wishes to leave his role as gunfighter. Yes, yeah, yeah, that's right. Um, that's right. That's part of the John. That's part of the mythology, as you indicate. It's always reluctance. You never, they never want to have to put on the gun and go to town and do the job. There's always part of the ritual is to play out in all these movies reluctance. A man's got to do what he's got to do, but they don't want to do it. There's this very elaborate getting of the gun in Pale Rider. The Clint Eastwood character is trying to give up, but you can't. You have one last job to do, and then of course he has to get out of town. That's right. But see, from one point of the myth is, one point of the myth is that he can't live. Heroic men like Shane and the Pale Rider can't live in such a conventional time, in a world of getting and spending. Yeah.
Yeah, John actually has put in something else. Just to comment, he says, then too, the man who shot Liberty Valance.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Simon Bradford says, Kuzumet hungry. He says, given that the myth of America is so contradictory and like all utopias, always undercut by disappointment, what does Michael think continues to sustain the utopia in America?
Yeah, what I, this is no answer really, but what I say is this is in the air Americans breathe and in the water they drink. Probably I would say the fundamental, to my mind, the fundamental foundation of all the myths is this Emersonian idea of the rugged or the individual. Trust yourself. Believe what is true for you for as true for all men. That is genius. You're on your own. You must, you must take be a rugged individual. That goes very deep, I think, into the American psyche. And so then that I think ties into this idea that if you can move out to other places, that getting away on your own, you can be responsible for yourself. But I think the really the fundamental American myth is the myth of individualism. We all love Social Security, but we don't like to admit it. And Trump and George Bush go running around the country screaming, "We'll never be a socialist country. We'll never be a socialist country." If they mean socialists like Scandinavia, you know, we are in part that kind of a country. But I think this idea of individualism, self-reliance out into the West is probably explains some of it.
Yeah, so that goes on though to the religious kind of disconnect, really, because Jesus said you have to love others as you love yourself, and it seems to be the love others drops out. It's just love yourself.
Remember Vance and the Pope getting into that hassle over the circles of love. Vance
Mm.
saying your first responsibility is to yourself and your family, and there's this widening circle of responsibility. And the Pope said, "No, no, 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 that's not the way we think about that anymore." And you see, that's part of the idea. I get my gun and I protect myself and my family. And the idea of, then only secondarily do I worry about other other people who are not in my immediate circle. So,
Mhm.
give me my
Mhm.
gun, leave me alone, I'll take care of my family, and so on. There's
So
an
that's
interesting,
two Americans talking,
pardon?
arguing. That's two Americans arguing because it's
Yeah.
the present Pope.
There's an
That.
interesting, and I would not want to go down that street, given the controversy that it would probably raise. But many, many years ago, an American historian named Lewis Mumford did a series of lectures in Israel. Well, this is 50 years ago or more, in which he drew parallels between um, the Israeli experience of settling the Middle East, their portion of the Middle East, with the American experience of going west. Now, as I say, I don't want to go any farther on that because it's very controversial. But there are a lot of similarities there, not all of which are very flattering either for the Americans or the Israelis. But we'll leave it at that.
Yes, understood. In a sense, it was what I was getting at in one of the earlier questions. Joe Simmons, hi Joe, and by the way, Simon Bradford, thanks for joining us from Hungary. That's terrific. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
Joe Simmons says, thanks, Mike, and Mike, for a valuable conversation grounded in American art and literature. If I may ask a provocative question based on that last comparison contrast of Trump and migrants' desires today, do you think those coming to the States today are not also looking for some of that enterprising Western expansion opportunity that has been a part of the plucky American spirit, for good or ill, all along?
Yes, I think I would agree. I mean, it's hard you can't hard to generalize. And what we ordinarily say is they come here because they want economic to find economic possibilities to create a better life, and that usually gets translated into make money and and raise a family. But I also I know from just some very limited experience that there's more to it than that. It's the idea of that, yes, of being free of oppression of various kinds and free of not just economic possibilities, but what would you call them? Human possibilities, moral possibilities, that you can live a life, you can believe what you want to believe, you can act. I think part of that idea of freedom or liberty certainly must play into the minds of some of those immigrants and migrants, and maybe many of them. It wouldn't surprise me, but I know only from limited experience that yes, that is true.
Do you think that this Edenic vision, over the last year in particular, looks as if the idea of America being great has rather exposed America as becoming shrunk, like pure wool washed in a machine and then heated in a dryer of lies? Do you think that's what's happening at the moment? Has it turned? Has the coin been turned the other way around?
Certainly, if I understand the question that you're getting at, certainly uh, uh, America's claim to some kind of moral higher ground has been certainly, I think, eroded significantly for any number of reasons. And I think, and I, in that, even I could start cuts in research, cuts in foreign aid, ambiguities with allies, all those kind of things. Inhumane treatment of immigrants, whether they are here illegally, not illegally, and so on. All of that, I think, has eroded America's claim to any kind of moral high ground. And this great this land of opportunity, possibility, and build into that, which I didn't mention until the very end, build into that idea of the West is the idea that the land is open, not just to people in the East, but people from Europe are coming, people from Asia coming, and despite the bad treatment some of those groups have had, people came from Europe and settled the land because I believe in their own, with their own kind of metaphoric understanding, that was a place of possibility.
Yeah.
I
Yes,
think now we should dismantle the Statue of Liberty, put it in storage until, and hopefully at some point in our history we can erect it again.
well, yeah, that's an amazing thing to say. It's really saying that it depends on the word great, doesn't it? It depends on whether you got moral greatness or whether you've actually got financial greatness,
Uh-huh.
and the two don't usually match. Mike, I'm
That
going to
I
bring.
was going to say that debt is looming, the national debt, but we won't talk about financial greatness. Sorry.
Yeah,
But,
or the pretense of financial greatness.
yeah.
Yeah, that's the other thing. Yeah. Um, Mine, that was a stimulating paper, and really exactly the right paper for the last Zooms of this series. And in fact, of all the literary series which we've been running now since I think 2018, and for this one, we're again preparing a book comprising 26 of the talks that have been given over the last year, and Vernon Press have said they wish to publish it. So we hope that this one on cultural encounter will be published next year. So look out for that. And if it's as successful as the other two, Christian Shakespeare question mark and the literary imagination, Christian literary imagination, they'll also go into paperback. That's an advert, of course, for those two books, but they are in paperback and available, Vernon Press, and available on Amazon. We just have one more session left in, because all the series that we've been running are now coming to an end this December. It's really very sad, but that's the reality of what seems to us is happening in the United States at the moment. And so free speech at the crossroads, international dialogues, that comes to an end on Wednesday, the 10th of December at 11 a.m. EST in the USA and 4 p.m. in the UK, when our panel will be discussing the thing that is hitting us, whether universities are losing the battle for free speech. So please join us for that. That's the very last of all of our series. That's on 10th of December at 11 a.m. I need to thank Georgetown University for supporting this series. We do it in association with the colleges in Oxford, but it's Georgetown that put the money behind this series, and I'm very grateful to them, especially the Vice President, Global Affairs, Tom Banchoff, and to his administrators at Georgetown, Julia Murillo and Mary Gordon, who've done a great job, and for Mike for his participation. But more than anybody, I would like to thank also the retired president of Georgetown, Jack DeGioia, without whom none of this would have happened. And I thank also you, the audience, for joining us, whether you be in America, in England, in Hungary, in China, in Colombia, wherever. We have reached across and around the world, and it's been quite fantastic with these series. Mike has been fully behind us all the way through, and I'm very grateful to you, Mike.
Thank you. And I would let me take the opportunity to thank you, Michael, for the time, the energy, the imagination that you showed in creating all three series of talks. It was a lot of work finding people and putting everything together every week. And I would hope that you are rewarded both on earth and in heaven for all your hard work. Thank you so much for making Monday at 11 o'clock here in the United States, at least in the Eastern time zone, something to look forward to. And I really appreciate it. And also I'd like to thank John and Joe for showing up for my talk, but particularly thank Michael for all the work he's done in making these series a reality.
Thanks very much for that. It's been part of my promised land because I'm not too sure that I'll get to another one. But thank you very much. My thanks also to people in Oxford, of course, particularly John O'Connor, the regent, Richard Finn, the director of studies, and Dominic White. And if you are who's the prior. If you are in the UK, please note that we are carrying on, but live with theology, the arts, and the common good. We had our first session last week. We've got another session coming up soon. So look out for that if you're in the Oxford area, because these talks are on in Blackfriars. I'm Mike Scott. I'm from Blackfriars Hall, Oxford. You can keep in touch with me, please, on LinkedIn at Professor Michael Scott or on Facebook at Michael Kerr Scott. Thank you all for joining us. Maybe see you on the 10th of December. I hope you'll join us then for the very, very last one. Thank you and goodbye. Thanks again, Mike. Bye-bye.